Whatever. Don't leave now. Tonight we're going to be learning Leilu Nishmas Texas father, Rav Chana Chanina ben Avram Shmuel. Yiratzon his neshama should have an aliyah. 16th yortzeit. There's cookies. Make some brachos. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'orei minei mizonos. When you give shiur the cookie in your mouth, it's not. All right. We are learning Maseches Nedarim, Daf Chav Zayin, short blot tonight, and relatively easy, certainly compared to last night's blot. Last night's blot was actually quite difficult. It was the kind of blot where if you actually explain everything properly, we would be here for like 4 hours. And to read it on the surface, we'll kind of get the conceptuals, but it really does require, most blot need this a little bit, that blot needed it quite a bit. So now we're going to be starting at a fresh Mishnah, a clean sugya for tonight, and we'll be stopping at the next Mishnah on the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Beis, and then we will call it a night. We had spoken about in the open of our parak, the parak of Arba Nedarim, there are 4 types of Nedarim that if a person makes those Nedarim, then the Nedarim really, they're not chal, they really don't count. And one of them was Nidre Onsin. So that's what this Mishnah is going to speak about halfway down Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Nidre Onsin. What is an example of Nidre Onsin? A neder where there was an ones. Hidiru chaveru sheyochal etzlo. We make up. I invite you for lunch, and you say, "Please make me a neder that I should come for lunch," and you do make a neder. And then v'chalahu, and then the person who's supposed to come for lunch gets sick, ones. O shechala beno, or his son gets sick. We saw this quoted earlier in the Masechta out of context. This is the proper source, and this extension of O shechala beno means, even if your attention is pulled, not because of your own needs, but because of the people for whom you're responsible for, that's still considered an ones, which is really crucial information. We would have thought it was just an innocuous sample. It's not innocuous at all. It expands the parameters of ones from just being about you to being even about the people around you. You're a doctor, whatever your responsibilities are. So therefore, the definition of an ones is a little bit wider than we might have thought. Oh, she'ikvo nahar, or he wanted to cross the river, but there was a problem with the river. According to some of the commentaries, the river swelled and the bridge was covered, or whatever the case may be, whatever the logistics are. Hare elu nidre onsin. These are examples of nidre onsin. Chole or chala beno, or the river, just logistics, traffic. I told my son today I was going to pick him up at a certain time. Gridlock by Tui and Lincoln because of the construction on the corner there. Gridlock. 10 minutes before I got through the light. It was a very long time. Even with a shortcut, it took a very long time. So that's automatically putter? It means that your neder is not a neder. Whatever other implications, it depends on the sugya. But what? Not when you actually make the neder. So it's still a problem making it in the first place, right? The neder has something built into it, and that's today's sugya, which is ones rachmana patre. We just can't control all of the features. So, all things being equal, the sun will rise tomorrow morning. So if I make a neder that tomorrow I'm going to pick you up at 4 o'clock, but because of things that were out of my control, not things that were, if I left my house at 4, I'm the Russia. That's on me. But if I left my house early, which I did, I gave myself more than ample time, and I was 20 minutes late. It took me a half hour to get to the yeshiva from my house. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon is crazy. It's ridiculous. So that's considered an ones, and that's what our sugya is today. And the Gemara starts with a case in Bezdin, and this case in Bezdin is going to try and figure out whether or not we apply the general rule of ones. And it says the Gemara as follows: Ahu gavra to itfis zachvisa bevedina. Let's say that you and I are having a machlokas in Bezdin, and I have some paperwork that is pretty good evidence that you owe me money. I don't have all of the paperwork as the Rishonim right here, but I have some of it. So I give you a few of my receipts, and then I say, I'm going to be back in a little bit. I have more paperwork to give you. I'm going to be back. The Omar, I who deposited those papers by you, was matvis zachvisa. I said, Ilo asina ad tlasin yomin. If it takes me more than 30 days to get back here to finish this dialogue, livatlun hani zachvisai, then I want you to just dissolve all of these papers, and then I won't collect any of the money. Dissolved. Now in his head, he was confident that he was going to come back. That's what he was planning for. He didn't really want it to be that the papers would be dissolved. And in fact, this type of Tanai is actually referred to as an asmachta, and we're going to be discussing this at the end of the sugya today. But the Gemara says that this was the story. Huh? Okay, I don't know. He didn't need to, but he did. Like I say this to my kids sometimes, like, if by tomorrow at 5 p.m. it just like rolls off my, if by tomorrow at 5 p.m. you're not done with your homework, No technology, whatever I say. So
He wants to show the exteriors about that.
there's reasons. I just
Wants to get his own money.
but he might only live 3 houses away. And then he got sick. And so whatever the case may be, he wanted. It could be what Gerald is saying. Very well, could be. I'm not. Your question may be better than my answer, but I don't know offhand. Other than that's what the case is. And then the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, isnis. Then an ones happened, and velo asa, and he never showed up. So here in this case, we have a machlokas. Let's review the case, and then we'll learn the machlokas. The case was that I'm one of the Baalei Din, and I have evidence that you owe me money. I take 2 or 3 receipts, I give them into Bezdin, and it indicates that you mamish signed on the dotted line that you owe me money. Fine. I put that in Bezdin. I say I'll be back within 30 days. Ones happened, and then now what? Well, what would we have thought? Well, you didn't show up in 30 days. Batel, the documents should all be nullified. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna, Batel zach v'sei. Why are we discussing this? It's a piece of cake. This case is obvious. You made the condition yourself, and you said that if I don't show up in 30 days, then the documents that I submitted will hereby be nullified retroactively, and therefore, my estate will not collect any money from that guy. It's just so clear. Says the Gemara, it's not so clear. Amar le Rava, anusu, the anus rachmana patre. Critical sugya in Shas. This is going to be based on a pasuk. What does the pasuk say that teaches us that anus rachmana patre, that when there's a scenario out of one's control, that they are then exempt from the implications of that ones? Let's talk about the ones in our context. The guy died on day 29, never showed up on day 30. There's no ones greater than dying. It was totally out of his control. So then what happens? It's ones rachmana patre. So which one is it? Is it like the first shita that says the documents are actually batel and his yorshim lose out on those documents? Or no, we say, which way do we say? So that was shita number 1. And then the Gemara says that in the name of Rabbah, that this is an ones mamish. What does the pasuk say? Ulena'ara lo sa'aseh davar. Rachmana litzlan, if a man violates a woman, so the halacha is that he gets killed. And by her, I mean, there's obviously all of the personal implications, the social implications of what happened to her, but she's not punished. But had it been that it was consensual, she would have been killed also potentially. You're right, but that's what a rape is. The rape is that it was against her will. She said no, he said too bad. He dies, she lives. So the pasuk says in Chumash, what do we learn from here? That a person who was, and we actually refer to rape in halacha as a me'anes, or if a person was ones, you were violated against your will, you're patur. Even though the act of intimacy is itself in other frames of halacha, mamish aser, kares under certain circumstances, here you're totally off the hook. Nida, irrelevant, doesn't matter. Irrelevant. That's a fascinating thing, by the way, because the act of intimacy with a nida is chayv kares. But if she's a nida and she is violated, she's still a nida. There's still tumas nida, but the Torah supersedes the mitzias of what's happening and says onis rachmana patre. So this is the machlokes in our case. Do we say like the person's condition? If I'm not back in 30 days, my documents are hereby batel, or do we say like Rava that onis rachmana patre? Maybe you'd want to argue that the rules of ones rachmana patre, that when a scenario is out of your control that you're exempt, maybe that's only ktala shiny. Maybe that's only when we're dealing with a case where one of the consequences is murder, or killing in this case, execution, because the rapist is going to be killed. So maybe we'd say ones rachmana patre, the reason why she's exempt is because he's getting that consequence of death. But maybe by lesser averas, we don't say onis rachmana patre. That's not true, says the Gemara. But it's not. Look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, listen to this. Our Mishnah expands the principle of onis rachmana patre from cases of capital punishment to even white-collar crimes. The Gemara says, "V'atnan nidre onsin hidiru chavero sheyochal etzlo v'chalahu o shechala bano o sheifo nahar harei elu nidre onsin." What does our Mishnah say? Your neder's a 0 because there was an ones involved. Was there death in that case? No, it's nothing. It was a low-level neder. It's aser, it's a korban, whatever the implications are. But you haven't done anything wrong. You haven't done anything that's going to give you. So we still say onis rachmana patre. So then Rabba's shita still stands.
So how does one fit with the other?
What do you mean?
Okay, so she has an onus and she's patur, but that's got nothing to do with this. I mean, how are the two really connected?
Well, Rabba is arguing the shita of Rav Huna. Remember the case we started with. I'm putting some receipts into Bezdin, you owe me money. And I say, if I don't come back within 30 days, they're batal. Rav Huna says, if you don't come back in 30 days, you're batal, even if there's an onus. Rava says, what are you talking about? Onis Rachman Patre. There's machlokas.
No, I know, but what's the proof that's coming from this anusa?
It's an accident.
Out of control. The guy, it says isnis. The guy says in our case.
But she didn't do anything. In this case, the guy made a neder. It's different. So it's an ones, yes, but it's not the preceding actions.
Oh, you're asking about the applicability of onis Rachman Patre to a neder that I generated. If I generated a neder, so the Gemara, it doesn't speak about this, but the Gemara makes just a blanket assumption that an ones is applicable across the boards. It is. And in a way, there kind of was the shvua, because we've made a shvua to keep halacha, and that guy broke halacha and violated a woman. He raped her. She had nothing. She was just a victim. She was just a karka, whatever it was. But you're asking a good question in Lumdus, but the Gemara seems to accept as a fact that that ones still applies even if the cases are variant, even if a person makes a neder. It's a good question. I never thought about it that way. It didn't cross my mind, but that's a good question. Now the Gemara is going to ask a few questions on Shitas Rava. Now remember, Shitas Rava was ones Rachman Patre, and in the case where I place documents in Bezdin and say he owes me this much, but I'm even going to bring more documents, and then there was an ones, Rava said it's ones Rachman Patre. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second, I'll show you a case where we don't employ the loophole of ones Rachman Patre. 4 lines from the bottom. Well, the Rava. And according to Rava, throughout, there's a machlokas if it's Rava or Rabba. So we're just going to read Rava because that's the text of the Gemara. Well, the Rava, why is it, Maishna, why is it that over here in our case that we started with the open of our Gemara, we said Onis Rachman Patre, but Maishna Mehad, it's not in the following case where we don't say Onis Rachman Patre. What was the case? Says the Gemara, a man gives a get to a woman on January 1st, and says, if I'm not back by December 31st of the same calendar year, then hareza gitech. And says the Gemara, umeis besoch yud beis chodesh, he died. Says the Gemara, hareza get. Well, what about onis Rachman Patre? It should be no different than our Mishnah. You made a neder, you died, the neder's not chal. There should be no different than the ratio of the case where Rava told us that it was onis Rachman Patre. You put documents into the Bezdin. You said, I'll be back in 30 days. The guy died. And what did we say? That according to Rava, onis Rachman Patre. So it says the Gemara, Amai v'ha meina isnis. V'ha meinas isnis. This is considered an ones. So if Rava's right, that we always employ the rule of onis Rachman Patre, not only for capital punishments, but even for smaller crimes, then, and not only for that, but even for Nedarim. So why wouldn't it work over here on Rachman Patre? If I don't give it to him within 12 months and he dies on the 11th month and the get never shows up. So what happens? We say hareza get. Lamai nafkamina for yibum. Huge nafkamina. If you're a Kohen, there's a lot of nafkaminas. Is that a machlokes about get meusa? I don't know. I have to look at this. I have to see it in the context. I don't know. I don't.
Two cases. The case would get here he wants that to happen.
Not if he dies. Maybe he was intending on coming back.
If he does die, he wants to be that she's already divorced from the
Rob Zafka, that's the Gemara's answer. But in the question phase, that's not true.
No, I understand.
In the question phase, he intended on coming back.
I'm saying I'm trying to go out to see between the two cases. The case by the money.
Yeah.
No, sorry, the case by getting one from 12 months ago. So her benefits, you'd like to have the benefit here.
You're right, but if ones Rachman Patre is a hammer and there's a nail in front of me, the case automatically kicks in ones Rachman Patre. It should have worked.
If that is guaranteeing the clause, it seals the clause that he made.
Says you.
Well, there's no way that happens.
Ones Rachman Patre. It's the biggest ones in the world.
There's no other way around it.
Ones Rachman Patre. That's exactly the point. Is that if you say that I will be back by January 1st of 2023, and you're giving her the get on January 1st of 2021, and then he dies halfway through the year, that's not what he wanted. Maybe he wanted to come back at 11 months. Onis Rachman Patre. So she should not be divorced, and then Lamai Nafkamina, she'll have to go through Yibum or whatever, Kohen, whatever the Nafkaminas are. There's a lot of Nafkaminas here. So this is a kasha on Rava, because Rava seemed to say in our case that if I deposit the documents and then all of a sudden the guy kicks before day 30. So according to Rava, onis rachmana patre, why over here is it not onis rachmana patre? Why do we say the get is chal? The get should not be chal. So says the Gemara on the last line, Amre, we can answer as follows. Dilma shiny hasa. Maybe the case of the get is a little bit different. Turning to the top of Kav Zayin Amud Beis, because says the Gemara, do you have a yoda demis? Had he known that he was going to die, the doctors say 6 months, right? The doctors say whatever, terminal whatever. Then min la'altar have a gamar b'yoav gita. He would have instantly given the get. Had he known that he was going to die, he for sure would have given the get. This was what you were hinting. You were saying the answer without knowing it was the answer because you're thinking through the sugya. But that's what the Gemara says. We make a new kimta in this case that we assume that the husband who gave the get on January 1st, 2022, and who said that if I'm not back by January 1st, 2023, what was his whole intention? She should not become a Yavam. So then, therefore, by definition, we know his Ratzon. That's a Nukimta. In that case, no Ones Rachmana Patre, because there's no Ones. He was talking about the Ones. If I die, then I want to make sure that you're not a Yavama. So therefore, the case is not a Raya. And the Gemara asks again, Ma'ishna, second line down, why is it that this case, in this case, the case we're about to see, we've learned already, Ma'ishna, why is it that Rava in our case says Ones Rachmana Patre, yet in the following case, seemingly things are different? Me'ahu de Omar Lehu, one person says to a group of people, Ilo asina mikana tlasin yomin lehave gita. He says that he gave a get to some shlichim, and he said, if I'm not back in 30 days, so we have Aleph Tishrei, right, to Aleph Cheshvan, 30 days. Says the Gemara, if I don't come back in that amount of time, so then Harei Gita. And Asa, he showed up on day 29 with a couple of hours to spare before Shkia Sachama, Upaske Mabra, and he was stopped by the river. But everyone was in earshot in the community. Omar Lahu, Chazu de Asoi, Chazu de Asoi, does everybody see me? I'm here. I'll grant it. I'm on the other side of the community threshold. I'm on the other side of the river. The river is the beginning of our district. But he calls out. He says, "I'm here. I'm here. Don't let the divorce be chal. I want to stay with my wife. I'm going to come back. But the river is too swollen. I can't cross the river." What?
Too bad, so sad.
It's the what?
Too bad, so sad.
Oh, wow. Your sensitivity is shining through. I love it. By the way, you and Shmuel say the same thing. But Amar Shmuel, Lo Shmei Masya, you haven't gotten to the city yet. Same exact thing. So says the Gemara, if you're Rava, why don't you say Ones Rachmana Patre? You can't control the height of the river. You can't control if the ferry is broken. You can't control if the bridge falls down. It's not so easy to cross a river back in the day. Now you can get a kayak, whatever. You can take a helicopter. You can, there's 100 ways to do it. But now you're going to tell me that they're divorced. Amai. Same kasha again against Rava. If you're going to tell me that in the case with which we started our Gemara, where I deposit documents and I say if I'm not back in 30 days, then you can be mavatal. Then if that's true, no Ones Rachmana Patre. Forget that. Your patre. So why over here is there no Ones Rachmana Patre? The Gemara says Dilma perhaps onsa de miglia shiny. When there is an ones that is commonplace or revealed, namely one that people know about, rivers swell. It's not a chiddush. It's not like dying out of the blue against all odds. This is a relatively commonplace type of thing that happens where the river can't be crossed. So says the Gemara, if that's true, then umabra migli onse. You can't say ones rachmana patre when there's a likelihood of that thing happening. What's the likelihood? If it's a like these are shilos, you got to figure out exactly what it means. But lemaisa, this is not a challenge against Rava, because Rava may be of the opinion, yeah, ones rachmana patre applies, but it doesn't apply when there's a common risk. If you're going skydiving without a parachute, you say ones rachmana patre. That's not ones. You're an idiot. That's not the way we do things. That's not thoughtful. Here the Gemara says the same thing, because rivers swell and because ferries break. That's not an ones.
The Mishnah used river as its last example, like non-Mishmut river is the river, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Like the very example, they're saying, that's, it's expected, etc. But when I said it calls it, it means really.
So that's a great question. Let's think that through. It's the end of the Mishnah says that Nidrei Onsen are included when a neder was made, and the reason he failed to attend was because ikvo nahar. Isn't that a raya brura to the sheet of Rav Huna? Or at least against our Gemara, because our Gemara says that Shmuel was of the opinion that you didn't get to the city because the Nahar was there. Maybe our Mishnah is just not like Shmuel. But how can a Shmuel argue on our Mishnah? Shmuel's an Amora. Gorgeous question. Did somebody talk about that? What?
Why does our mission include a riddle preventing them from intending the peace? As long as it gets translated, we're not going to take an effect. You must say that the mission refers to a river that swelled unexpectedly, such as run off the mountain, snow and wind, person
Okay, beautiful.
Expected and unexpected.
Beautiful. Yeah, very well done. That's a great question. Thank you, Stan. That's great. Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So that's what the Gemara says, and now you split another hair to say, okay, not just swelling, but it's common swelling. Beautiful, beautiful. What?
In August, it'll be different than in January.
But that's expected because now you know the season, right? So you're saying that in the summer where everything is either melted already, what do you got to know? You have to know. L'may nafkamina, whether or not you're still married, no biggie. You know. Wow, great call. Says the Gemara. Wait 1 second. I don't understand the shita of Rav Huna. The Gemara says a third of the way down, Rav Huna, Michti, we need to analyze his shita. Before we analyze his shita, let's remember what his shita is. We had said that if papers were submitted to Bezdin that you owe me money, and I said I'll be back in 30 days, and then an ones took place. So Rav Huna was of the opinion that the documents are in fact batel, even in the face of an ones, seemingly. Right? That's what it seems like. So the Gemara questions, hold on 1 second. Michti, asmachtahi. This type of condition that we have in the opening case of our Gemara with the documents in Bezdin is a type of case that's called an asmachta. I'm going to be here within 30 days. Okay, if I'm not here in 30 days, fine, you can be mevatel everything. That type of kinyan is called an asmachta. And there is a discussion in the Gemara as to whether or not an asmachta works. The asmachta lo kanya. We paskin, we'll soon see if we paskin this way, we paskin that asmachta is not kona. So if it's true that asmachta is not kona, then in the case that we have, where I really thought that I was going to be back within 30 days, Nebuch, it didn't work out the 1% chance that I didn't come back. But if it's true that asmachta is lo kanya, then I should not, then the documents shouldn't be batel. Rav Huna, how do you even have a shita b'chlal? If the whole thing is an asmachta, I'm pulling out the carpet from under you. It's not a tzaddi side question. It's fundamental to your shita. If the model of your dialogue in this case is asmachta, it's a non-starter. And you should not say that it's batel. It should not be binding at all. Asmachta lo kanya. Great question of the Gemara. So the Gemara, not that it needs my sanctioning, it just, I enjoy the question, I should say. So it says the Gemara, asmachta lo kanya. And the Gemara says, no. Shiny hacha, our case is different. De mitvasan zechusan. Because I already submitted the paperwork into Bezdin. If you already submitted the paperwork into Bezdin, then we don't say that the kinyan's an asmachta. In other words, it's no longer a conceptual condition that I'm very likely to return with a very small percentage of me not returning. Here, I actually did something. I put it in Bezdin, and then I said, I'll be back to get the rest. There, we don't say asmachta lo kanya. Says the Gemara, are you sure? Vehecha de mitzvasan lav asmachtahi. Where the documents were put into Bezdin, do we not say that that's still called an asmachta? Who cares if the papers were submitted? Lamaisa, it's still, at least what I think, it's in my control to return. So I'm going to be back within 30 days. So, okay, the 1% case. It should still be an asmachta. After all, v'hatnan, halfway down. Misha para mixas chovo. Let's say that I owe you tons of money. I owe you $1 million. And I paid you, including paperwork. Was para mixas chovo. I paid you 300,000. I owe you 7. And then v'hishlish es shtaro. And v'hishlish, we've seen this language before in Shas. It means we include a third person to be the guarantor. I give him my money. Is the mediator, whatever the right phrase is, and he's holding on to my money. The Omar, and he says as follows, and here's the language that might be an asmachta. If I don't get back to you within 30 days, give him the money, give him the $700,000. Tein lo shtaro. Higia zman velo nasan. What happens if that 30 days comes and then the guy doesn't show up? Is this an asmachta, yes or no? Rabbi Yossi Omer, Yitain. Rabbi Huda Omer lo Yitain. Rabbi Yossi says Yitain, meaning the condition took effect. And Rabbi Yehuda says, lo yitain, don't give it. It's an asmachta. The condition doesn't take effect. Who do we paskin like? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua, Amar Rab, ein halacha ki Rabbi Yossi. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi. We paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that really it's lo yitain. So you made a condition, and the condition didn't even count. Why not? Obviously, it must be that it's an asmachta, and asmachta is lo kanya, even though the paperwork had changed hands already. To Omar, asmachta kanya, ein halacha ke Rabbi Yossi damar asmachta kanya. So that's a kasha in the Gemara. And the Gemara says, shiny hacha, to Omar levatlan zechuse, zachvese. Really, our case is different, because it's not a question of the condition of whether or not I came back or not. The question was whether or not we are mevatel the documents. And in the case with which we opened our Gemara today, he said, if I'm not back in time, not just give him the money or don't give him the money. He used a very strong language. These documents are hereby batel. And that strong language makes the case not relevant to a case of asmachta. It's different. It's no longer the same case. V'hilchasa, how do we paskin? The halacha is, as we close off for the day, asmachta kanya. We do assume that a condition of an asmachta does work. However, only under certain conditions. V'hu de lo anis. It has to be that there was no ones. U dekanu mine bebezdin chashu. And the kinyan took place. There are different girsas of this Gemara. It might be u dekanu mine and u bebezdin chashu, but we'll read it with the pashtus of the Gemara. U dekanu mine bebezdin chashu, that this kinyan took place in a chashu bebezdin, but not stam, not out in the field. Out in the field, we say asmachta lo kanya. Huge halachic nafkaminas in regards to asmachta is in regards to gambling. Let's say that we're playing a game of poker, and what's my assumption in poker? I'm going to win. We're playing blackjack. I think I'm going to win. I have a good hand. So I say, all in. What's going on in my head? I'm going to win all this money. Now, obviously, there's a chance that you're going to lose, and you're aware that there's a chance that you're going to lose. But Lemaisa, what you want is that you plan on winning. That's why you put all of your chips in the middle. So if asmachta is lo kanya, if that type of condition doesn't work, then I'm not even obligated to pay you if I lose, because asmachta is lo kanya. These are big sugyas in halacha about whether or not gambling, the Sfardim are super makbid on gambling, that they avoid it altogether, and even buying lottery tickets can be problematic. These are big shabbos in halacha, but the sugya of gambling does hover, at least in great part, around asmachta, and that's what our Gemara says for today. Mirza Hashem, tomorrow night we'll pick up with a new mission on the bottom of Chav Zayin and Beis, wishing you all a beautiful night.